This afternoon we're speaking about the inner path of Hinduism, the mystical path of the East. Hinduism is the world's oldest religion. It is also one of the least understood in the West. Hinduism is the fount from which all the world's mystics have drunk, whether they knew it or not. It is the oldest source of the idea that latent in each one of us is the self that is God. Hinduism gives the first step-by-step instructions on how to realize or become one with God. It teaches that there are many paths to salvation and that each of us should choose the path that best suits our temperament. The inner path of Hinduism is a well-marked one, and yet to the casual observer it may appear to be lost in a mire of superstition and the rote worship of many gods. Unlike other world religions, Hinduism has no founder. Its origins are obscure. The earliest Hindu texts, the Vedas, say that they were given by God to 7 seers at the dawn of time. Since the 18th century, scholars have believed that Hinduism was rooted in primitive nature worship. The Vedas contain prayers to a multitude of gods, leaving many with the impression that Hinduism is polytheistic. It is not until later texts, the Upanishads, that the idea of the God within is clearly stated. Scholars think the Upanishads were written between the 8th and 4th centuries BC. They are the root of mysticism in all the world's religions. We find echoes of them in Buddhism, Taoism, Sufism, mystical Christianity, and Judaism. The Kaival Upanishad tells us that which is supreme Brahman, the self, the great support of the universe, subtler than subtle, eternal, that alone thou art. Thou art that alone. This affirmation, that thou art, Tattvam Asi, sums up the inner path of Hinduism. You are Brahman. We can chant Tattvam Asi. Tattvam Asi, Tattvam Asi, Tattvam Asi, Tattvam Asi. Thou art that alone, that Brahman thou art. This mantra sums up the inner path of Hinduism. You are Brahman. I don't know if you quite realize how profound is this mantra and what you are really affirming, and that when you are affirming it, Brahman, at the very center of creation, is suddenly quickened in your temple. It would be very easy to go into samadhi with this mantra in a matter of minutes if you really have the comprehension that you are Brahman. Chanting the Om draws the soul into union with Brahman and with the original word who was with Brahman in the beginning. Chanting the Om sends the soul back to her point of origin in the great central sun. By the sounding of the word Om, the soul is repolarized to Brahman, your soul, and recharged with the positive spin of the Atman, primed for the homeward journey as she reaps the karmas she has sown while filled with the gladness of her Lord. Let us chant the Om as you visualize the umbilical cord from the great central sun descending to your mighty I Am presence, your holy Christ self, to the point of the seat of the soul chakra, midpoint between the navel and the base of the spine. We read in the Chandogya Upanishad, "In the center of the castle of Brahman, our own body, there is a small shrine in the form of a lotus flower, and within can be found a small space. We should find the one who dwells there, and we should want to know him. And if anyone asks, 'Who is he who dwells in a small shrine in the form of a lotus flower in the center of the castle of Brahman?' Whom should we want to find and to know?" We can answer, "The little space within the heart is as great as this vast universe. The heavens and the earth are there, and the sun and the moon and the stars, fire and lightning and winds are there, and all that now is and all that is not, for the whole universe is in him, and he dwells within our heart. Brahman is in all things and is the Atman of all living beings." This means that Brahman is the self with a capital S of all living beings. Brahman is the creator, the preserver, the destroyer or transformer of all things. Atman, on the other hand, is a Sanskrit term meaning breath. As used in the Upanishads, it means the divine spark or indwelling God. It is the imperishable, undecaying core of man. Atman is identical with Brahman, who is the eternal absolute being, absolute consciousness and absolute bliss. Most Western scholars translate Atman as the soul. They do so erroneously. Atman should really be translated as spirit with a capital S, as God's self, or as the divine spark. Atman is identical with Brahman. Atman, therefore, cannot be considered to be the soul, because the soul, by definition, has descended into the realm of relative good and evil, while Atman, by definition, belongs to the realm of absolute good. In our book, Climb the Highest Mountain, Mark Prophet and I recorded the precise words of El Morya, which clarify the concept of the soul. Mark and I were concerned at the lack of parallel between the interpretations of Western scholars and the actual true meaning of the Upanishads. Therefore, we appealed to El Morya, and he dictated these paragraphs for Climb the Highest Mountain to set the record straight. He said, "God is a spirit, and the soul is the living potential of God. The soul's demand for free will and its separation from God resulted in the descent of this potential into the lowliest state of the flesh. Sown in dishonor, the soul is destined to be raised in honor to the fullness of that God estate, which is the one spirit of all life. The soul can be lost, the spirit can never die," which translates, the soul can be lost, Atman can never die. So then, what is the Hindu concept of soul? What is the real equivalent? The Hindu principle that most closely resembles the Western idea of soul is Jiva, spelled J-I-V-A. Jiva is defined as one who lives in the body, the embodied self that identifies with body and mind. As ego, it creates the notions of duality and causality, and thereby becomes bound to the cycle of birth and death. The jiva has mingled with the non-self and thus become tainted by or mixed with evil. Now replace that sentence with the word soul. The soul has mingled with the non-self and thus become tainted by or mixed with evil. That is what El Morya meant when he used the words sown in dishonor. The soul separated out from God and therefore violated its own cosmic honor and the cosmic honor flame. It descended into duality, and therefore it lost its stature as being eternal. Hindus believe that the jiva is eternal, although some believe that a jiva can become eternally confined in the cycles of birth and death, or confined to hell. The ascended masters teach that the soul can self-destruct through its own actions. The book of Revelation, written down by John the Beloved as a dictation from Jesus Christ, tells of the second death. It says, "He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death." The second death is defined in Revelation 20, verses 14 and 15. It is written, "And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire." In our book, The Lost Teachings of Jesus, we explain the second death as the termination of the soul, as the potential that could have realized Brahman through the Atman, but chose not to. It's very important for you to get this straight today, because you will understand the Ascended Master's teachings on Hinduism. The second death is the termination of the soul as the potential that could have realized Brahman through the Atman, but chose not to. Why then does God allow for, 1, the possibility of self-annihilation through the denial of the inner God, and 2, the possibility of self-exaltation through the confirmation of the inner God? The reason is that through the Atman, the soul has the free will to be or not to be. If we could not exercise that free will choice, then we would be mere robots, replications of Brahman, but not really the true Brahman. If the soul chooses to allow the human ego to take over the body, the mind, the heart, the consciousness, and the soul, she is thereby choosing not to be in the divine ego or God. Thus she loses her ability to perpetuate the original spin of aliveness, whereby she was spun out from the heart of creation in the beginning. Let us explain. The ego devours the soul like a cancer, melding itself to it until it is no longer possible to separate the soul from the dweller of its own creation. How often we discover that a friend has a cancer. It is so much a part of an organ that the only way to take the cancer out is to take the entire organ out. This is the concept of the soul being bonded to the ego, and the ego devouring the soul by the soul's permission. By the time the soul stands before the judgment seat, it is already self-consumed, and the final judgment and the second death are the ratification by heaven's law of that which the soul herself has already decreed by free will. After the death of the soul, or jiva, the flame of Atman merges with the flame of Brahman, and God is one. As the Gita says, birthless, deathless, and changeless remaineth the spirit forever. You see, when the soul self-aborts, it is the abortion of what might have been, but chose not to be. The word with Brahman sows millions of souls in each manvantara. Some attain everlasting life by conscious union with the Atman and Brahman, and some attain to everlasting death. The self-aborted souls leave spaces of emptiness where the light of God could have been mirrored to all of cosmos through them, had they chosen to so magnify the Lord of creation. When they self-abort, all creation loses the joy of that virtue of God which they were destined to embody. And so there is a permanent loss in that manvantara. But in succeeding ages, other souls will choose to reflect the wonders of Creator and creation, and all that was lost may ultimately be regained as new souls exercise their potential to be one with the Atman and to realize Brahman as their real self. Let us underscore the reality that is before each one of us. The soul potential, or Jiva, can take the high road of the return to the Godhead. The sage Sanat Kumara gives this teaching in the great Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. As a goldsmith purifies the dross of his metal by repeatedly casting it into the fire with very persistent efforts of his own, after the same manner, Jiva succeeds in cleansing himself by his course through hundreds of births. Someone may be seen to purify himself in only one life by mighty efforts. Once purified, your soul reunites with Atman and Brahman. We are not free until every part of us is one with the infinite. So we have joyous work to do in this life, and we secure the protection for our souls daily through the invocation of Archangel Michael. Henri Le Saux, a Benedictine monk, went to India as a missionary in the late 1940s. After meeting the Hindu mystic saint Ramana Maharshi, Le Saux decided that Christianity could benefit India only when it could produce mystics like him. Ramana Maharshi lived from 1879 to 1950, one of the most precious saints that India has ever produced. When I first heard of him, I felt that he was a kindred soul of all of us. As an Indian schoolboy, he had a mystical experience in which he realized that his real nature was imperishable and unrelated to his body. At the age of 17, he left his family, went to Arunachala, the mountain consecrated to Shiva, threw away all his possessions, and sat down to meditate. His body began to waste away. His hair and fingernails grew to unmanageable lengths. Insects ate away at his legs. He had such a longing for God that nothing else really mattered. Soon he attained total identification with his divine self. He attracted a large following and became one of India's most popular holy men. Ramana Maharshi's basic principle was that oneness with God, or the self, is not an alien or mysterious state, but the natural condition of man. He said that the best definition of the self is, I am that I am. Henri Le Saux, the Benedictine monk who tried to emulate Ramana, became a hermit at Arunachala and began to meditate. Following is his description of a mystical experience in which he received a special awareness of Atman. In my own innermost center, in the most secret mirror of my heart, I tried to discover the image of him to whom I belong, of him who lives and reigns in the infinite space of my heart. But the reflected image gradually grew faint, and soon it was swallowed up in the radiance of its original. Step by step, I descended into what seemed to me to be successive depths of my true self, my being, my awareness of being, my joy in being. Finally, nothing was left but he himself, the only one, infinitely alone. Being, awareness, bliss, Sat, Chit, Ananda. In the heart of Sat, Chit, Ananda, I had returned to my source. The Mundaka Upanishad says, the luminous Brahman dwells in the cave of the heart and is known to move there. It is the great support of all, for in it is centered everything that moves, breathes, and blinks. O disciples, know that luminous Brahman to be yourself, that which is both gross and subtle, which is adorable, supreme, and beyond the understanding of creatures. The message of the Upanishads is that God is in his creation. God has placed the spirit of himself in each and every one of his sons and daughters who are made in his image and likeness. And that not only can you become one with God, but you can become that God. Becoming one with Brahman may seem easy or hard, depending on your perspective. Are you inside of him, or is he inside of you? Are you his self, or is he yourself? This is a tale about the yogi and the fish. It is told by Swami Jyotirmayananda. There once lived a saint who prayed and lived a life of intense devotion. Months passed by, years rolled on, yet he did not find God, who alone could answer his prayers and reward him with liberation and immortality. The saint became impatient. He cried out as he beheld a merry stream rippling by, "There is no God. I have spent my years of devotion in vain." But out of the stream jumped a fish who said, "I have lived in this stream in vain, for I do not see water anywhere and am dying of thirst." The saint laughed at the folly of the fish. "You see water all around, and yet you are thirsty, you silly fish." "Even so, O saint," said the fish, "you are surrounded by God, and yet you are thirsting for his realization. Open your eyes and do not be as silly as you think I am." Brahman, Atman is not something that we can comprehend with our minds. We read in the Kina Upanishad, "Neither mind nor eye, neither ear nor speech can tell us anything about him, because neither the eye nor the ear nor the mind can reach him. But he alone is the agent, operative through all these organs. He makes the eye perceiver, the ear hearer. He makes the mind a thinker, and he makes the life a living force. But he in his own nature cannot be grasped by any one of these." This is the essence, my friends, of Hindu mysticism. The goal of life is to remove the veil of ignorance that prevents the Atman within us from shining forth. As we read in the Atma Bodha, a treatise by the 8th century saint Shankara, the Atman appears to be limited because of ignorance. When ignorance is destroyed, truly the Atman shines alone, as does the sun when the cloud passes away. We have created this cloud of ignorance throughout our many lives on earth by our negative thoughts and deeds. When we realize the Atman, that is, when we become with it, we also become one with Brahman. You could say the Atman, being your true self and real self, is the Holy Christ self. The divine spark and the Holy Christ self are the same and one, God in manifestation in you. Through this sublime oneness, we are become immortal, free from the round of rebirth. Shankara described the process of becoming one with Brahman by saying, "My mind fell like a hailstone into that vast expanse of Brahman's ocean. Touching one drop of it, I melted away and became one with Brahman. And now, though I return to human consciousness, I abide in the joy of the Atman." Such descriptions have led some to conclude that the individual consciousness is annihilated when it unites with Brahman. But this is not the case. Shankara told us, even though the yogi's mind is dissolved in Brahman, he is fully awake, free from the ignorance of waking life. He is fully conscious, but free from any craving. Such a man is said to be free even in this life. For him, the sorrows of this world are over. Though he possesses a finite body, he remains united with the infinite. When a God-realized or Brahman-realized soul passes from the screen of life, she still exists as a person. She is herself, but she is omnipresent because she is one with God, and God is everywhere. My beloved teacher and twin flame Mark Prophet, who achieved reunion with God through the ritual of the Ascension after his passing February 26, 1973, described this state of all beingness with a joyous exclamation. He said, "Behold, I am everywhere in the consciousness of God." I ask you to take this mantra of Mark Prophet, whom we call the Ascended Master Lanello, and recite it often and achieve your profound union with Brahman. Together. Behold, I am everywhere in the consciousness of God. Behold, I am everywhere in the consciousness of God. Behold, I am everywhere in the consciousness of God. As you meditate with this mantra, think of where you are when you say that. You are in the heart of the Atman, of everyone you know and don't know in all of cosmos. You are in the heart of every star. You are in every blade of grass and flower and tree. You are a partaker of the infinite. When you start contemplating this, you realize that the Atman in you and the Atman in someone else is the same. And so you can love everyone as yourself. Love the Atman in everyone. You can sense a universal kinship with all life, where you are not tied to all life on the surface, but at that very point of the seed potential. Sometimes the novice on the path can take the idea of oneness with God to extremes. This is the story of a guru and his young Chela, told by Heinrich Zimmer. The guru had been instructing the Chela that everything is God. The Chela had a flash of realization. He said, "God is the sole reality. That divine one may be found in everything." After his lesson, he left his guru and began to walk down the middle of the road in a state of contemplative bliss. Soon, a huge elephant came from the opposite direction. The driver riding on the neck shouted, "Clear the way!" The student saw the elephant, but he said to himself, "Why should I make way for that elephant? I am God. The elephant is God. Should God be afraid of God? And he continued walking down the middle of the road. But when God came to God, the elephant swung its trunk around his waist and tossed him out of the way. He landed hard, but more shocked than hurt. Covered with dust, he returned to his guru and told him what had happened. The guru said, "Indeed, you are God. So is the elephant. But why did you not listen to God's voice calling to you from the driver, who is also God, to clear the way?" A fully realized God being would have had no problem stopping the elephant. The next story, told by Swami Prabhupada about his guru, Swami Brahmananda, illustrates this point. Brahmananda was one of the disciples of Ramakrishna. Once when Brahmananda was walking with Prabhupada and another disciple, a mad bull came charging down the road. Prabhupada writes, "In order to protect our master, both of us stepped in front of him, but Brahmananda suddenly grabbed us both. Though he was then an old man, we were like feathers to him, and thrust us behind him. He simply stood there and stared directly at the charging bull. The bull almost at once came to a halt directly in front of us, shook its head, and quietly trotted off." By mantra yoga, the Guru Brahmananda had become Brahman. It is axiomatic. All elemental life and the angelic hosts bow to the God-realized individual. We're going to give a mantra now. It goes Om Namo Narayanaya. Nara means supreme being. Write it down. Nara means supreme being. Anaya means the abode of. So this is how the mantra translates. Om. When you begin with the Om, you make the connection to the great central sun and Brahman with the word in the beginning. Om. I bow to the supreme being who is the abode of all souls. The ascended masters and the Eastern adepts tell us that to know the meaning of the mantra makes it meaningful for us. We don't want to simply memorize words or foreign phrases. We want to get to the heart of the meaning. The supreme being, of course, is Brahman. In the heart of Brahman, we abide and we visualize ourselves in his heart. Narayana is considered to be a name for Vishnu, but early texts also ascribe it to Brahman. Our beloved Mark will lead us in this mantra. Om Namo Narayana, 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 Om Namo How many of you are having a little trouble visualizing yourself living inside of God? Is that something you can easily visualize or not? This is why Hinduism has the most marvelous statues of all the various deities. You can take a picture or a statue of Lord Maitreya, or of Shiva, or of Vishnu, or of Manjushri, Any one of those great spiritual novas whose birth has created the ripples that never cease to touch, to go out and to touch the extremes of cosmos and return. Those who have become sons of the great central sun. So you take a statue of Krishna, you put it in front of you when you give the mantra, and you look at the statue, and you imagine there's a little door about in the chest where the heart would be, and you see yourself climbing like a little child inside, and you sit there in a lotus posture. You visualize yourself sitting in the lotus posture inside of Vishnu. So you are seated before him, you are giving devotion to Vishnu or to Brahma or to Krishna. And pretty soon, the object of your devotion and the visualization transfers to yourself. So you see this statue become larger, completely superimposed over you, yourself inside, and then as you continue to recite the mantra, you are becoming one with Brahman. When you have a very strong visualization, you have a yang mind, and you can hold with steel that focus of visualization. Reciting this mantra for 3 minutes, you can be in the heart of bliss. Each time we give a mantra here, I have to recover from the mantra to begin speaking from the intellectual mind again. So I want you to know that your devotion depends on right diet, right strength of mind and strength of body. If your mind is not strong and your body is not strong, you cannot sit still and recite a mantra and keep your attention on it. Avoid sweets and sugars and the extremes of meat. Come closer to the center and have a balanced life and practice this mental discipline. The other discipline you can apply to it is the discipline of love, the love of the heart. You love God so much that you desire to keep your attention upon him in one of his many forms. And because you desire to give and receive that love, you cannot take your attention off of him.
And threw his arms around my neck. Show me how you do it, and I promise that I'll run away with you. I'll run